everybody.
Hello.
And welcome to Sound in Paint, celebrating the beautiful. And Linda and I, would like to thank you guys very much for coming out on a beautiful afternoon and spending a little time with us. We're really honored. As you know, this is an interactive performance. Linda will be painting. She's already begun.
The brush.
Yeah, the coolest paint. And I'm going to be reading some parts from my newest book and telling you a little bit about the book. And then I'm going to play music for you that hopefully sort of reflects back on the book and gives you a feeling for being in the mood of the book. So my hope is that you will be completely surrounded in sound, a feast for the senses, eyes, ears, your mind, your spirit. So welcome. Without further ado, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to open by reading a little bit from the very beginning of my book, which will put you in the mood for the book. Okay? And maybe before I do that, I shall pass out these nifty new papers, which will tell you about the book. So that if you like it, you can get it. It's on Amazon. You have my website. You have all my information there. Please take. And yeah, and that way, if you learn more about the book, you will be able to purchase it. Okay, now we're good to go. So as you can see, the book is called They Raised Me Up, A Black Single Mother and the Women Who Inspired Her. Chapter 1, Carolyn and Sarah, Somerville, Massachusetts, August 1986. Blam! A heavy object thuds against my bedroom wall, startling me from a deep sleep. Heart pounding, I prop myself up on one elbow and listen intently. Silence. I squint at the clock on the cardboard box beside my bed. 1:45 a.m. Stumbling into the bathroom, I press my ear against the wall. The banging has stopped. I tiptoe back into the bedroom to check on my daughter. If Sarah wakes up now, there'll be no getting her back to sleep for the rest of the night. Fortunately, my 4-year-old continues to sleep peacefully, sprawled in the center of the sagging double bed we share. As always, she is wearing her favorite pair of PJs, the pink ones with the polka dots and the booties on the feet. And as always, my daughter has her thumb in her mouth. Of course, I know it's bad for her, but I just can't bring myself to make her stop. Over this past year, Sarah has watched her parents fight more often than I care to admit. If she needs to suck her thumb to cope with the stress, I am not going to stop her. I lift the covers and slide back into bed next to her. Blam! The thud of something falling in the next apartment rattles the only picture on my wall, a colorful Romar Bearden print of jazz musicians I bought 3 months ago to celebrate my divorce. This time, the banging is accompanied by the sound of voices, a man's yelling, a woman's high-pitched screams. I can't make out what they are saying, but clearly something ugly is taking place. A minute later, I hear the sound of running footsteps and the voices retreat, presumably to the other end of their apartment. For the 10th time this week, I ask myself whether it was a mistake for me to leave Tacoma. And for the 10th time this week, I remind myself that if I am ever going to realize my dream of making it as a jazz pianist, Boston is the place to be, at least for now. Maybe one day I'll move to New York City, the mecca of the jazz universe. But I am a Black single mother with a 4-year-old biracial baby and no money. At the moment, living in Somerville, a working class suburb on the outskirts of Boston, is difficult enough. So that's the opening of my book. And as you see, part of the book tells my story of a single mother struggling to make it in Boston, and my adventures, which were several, involving men, motherhood, and music. To complement that story, I also told the story of the people who inspired me. And I talk a lot about my family. My great-grandmother, who you see on the card here, is this woman here, was also a single mother. And here she is with her daughter, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother was dealing with being a Black single mother in Alabama in 1900. So every time I thought maybe my situation was difficult, I was able to look back and see that, in fact, I had it pretty easy compared to some. So now I'm going to play for you. As I say, I was here in Boston attempting to be a jazz musician and to try to make it here. And so I thought maybe it would be fun for me to share with you some of the pieces that I was working on and some of the things I enjoyed. So one of my biggest influences musically is the great Horace Silver, for jazz fans, a wonderful jazz pianist. And so I'm going to play a small set, about 15 minutes worth of Horace Silver's music for you. So relax and we'll watch Linda create something beautiful here. was a few of the tunes that I was desperately practicing in my little apartment from hell in Somerville, living, and you did get, we were sleeping in the same bed, right? Me and my kid, 4 years old, can you picture us? No money, Somerville neighbors. That particular neighbor, if you read the book, you will find that I did end up calling the cops on that particular, there was a whole situation going on there. But as I say, in addition to my life, and certainly I think far more important than my own problems, was the story of my great-grandmother and the 5 amazing African-American women who inspired me. And her name was Lillian Pruitt, and she and my grandmother were also two against the world in a far more difficult time. And I'm just going to read you, the book tells in alternating chapters, I'll talk one chapter about my own story, which I do eventually get out of the apartment.
And
but
here she is.
Yep, here I am, alive and well. And then in alternating chapters, I tell the story of my great-grandmother's journey from a miniature little town in Alabama to eventually moving to Harlem in New York City, and her life and stories. And she was also a musician. She never got to perform professionally, but she had a beautiful soprano voice. She gave concerts for her church, and she was always a lover of music and the arts, and it is from her that I derived the saying, celebrate the beautiful. She taught us all to celebrate the beautiful was one of her favorite sayings. She would say it all the time, celebrate the beautiful, and everybody in my family says it. When I told them I was naming my concert, Celebrate the Beautiful, they were like, yes. So, this is a little bit about my great-grandmother. Chapter 2, Lily, Midway, Alabama, November 1896. On the day before Thanksgiving, 1896, Lillian Pruitt and Richard King walked into the Bullock County Courthouse in Union Springs, Alabama, to apply for a marriage license. Although she was just 14, my great-grandmother was already a beautiful woman with luxuriant brown hair, shapely curves, and striking oval eyes. We do not know what Richard King looked like, only that he was 31 years old, and that his family came from Union Springs, and that he, like most of Bullock County's African Americans, earned his living farming a patch of ground rented to him by a white landowner. The following day, Lily and Richard were married in Lily's hometown of Midway, Alabama. Although history has left us no record as to the details of the ceremony, I like to imagine that all of Lily's Pruitt kinfolk were in attendance. I picture the wedding party gathered for a soul food banquet with ham and perhaps some roasted corn, fresh picked greens cooked with fatback. Surely they ate fresh baked cornbread and biscuits drenched in butter. And for dessert, pound cake and huckleberry pie. In my imagination, Lily and Richard's friends are dancing to the tune of a local fiddler. As the celebration continues, someone struts his stuff with a buck and wing dance. Flaying the air with his arms, he leaps, twists, and turns, his feet tapping out sharp, intricate rhythms, while the crowd circles round him, singing and clapping their hands. Lily revels in her special moment and takes a turn with each of the dancers, her long hair flying, her face flushed with joy. Days of leisure such as this would have been rare for Lily and Richard. As a child, Lily grew up on the very same land her grandfather had worked as a slave. In exchange for half their cotton crop, the Pruitt family's landlord provided the family with seed, housing equipment, and farm animals. The cost of these items was then deducted from their profits at harvest time. The more money the Pruitt family made, the more money the landlord made. However, if the crop failed, the Pruitts were still responsible for the supplies they had been advanced, and they earned nothing for their entire year's labor. The two-room shack provided by the Pruitt's landlord was primitive. No glass in the windows, no screens, and no indoor plumbing. All the water needed for washing, cooking, and drinking had to be hauled up from the well several times a day. Lily's mother would have risen before dawn to cook breakfast for her husband and their 4 children. One can imagine Georgia Pruitt humming quietly to herself in the blue-black darkness as she stirs last night's ashes and places another log on the fire. As she rolled out her biscuit dough and set the fat back to sizzle in the pan, perhaps Georgia sang a mournful spiritual. Oh Lord, my good Lord, keep me from sinking down. Or, as the sun peeked over the horizon, perhaps she sang something more cheerful. I got a robe, you got a robe, all God's children got robes. When I get to heaven, gonna put on my robe and walk all over God's heaven. By the time the sky was fully lit, the Pruitt family would have finished a breakfast of fresh cornbread, biscuits, molasses, and fried salt pork, and begun their day in the cotton fields. So that's a little flavor from chapter 2. And you see I backed up about 100 years and telling a little bit about the life of people there. And so now, to sort of complement that side of the book, I'm going to play you some arrangements of a few of my favorite Negro spirituals. So you'll probably recognize at least a few of them. my grandmother was hugely into spirituals. She grew up with those, and her mother sang, and her grandmother sang, and I'm pretty sure they all sang. And I feel that I was blessed to have this tradition. So when I was struggling, come on in, come on in. When I was struggling in my own life and trying to figure out what to do with myself and how I was gonna survive and make it, my mother would tell me these amazing stories about my grandmother and my great-grandmother and these people. And I began to realize that, in fact, it was possible. So I'm going to read you one little short section from the book. This is about my great-aunt Marjorie, and no book reading of mine goes without mentioning my great-aunt Marjorie, because she was a huge influence in my life. As you will hear when I read you, she was an extremely spunky and fiery woman. She was about like that. And she died at the age of 92, and she was peppy pretty much to the end. For 50 years, she founded and continued to run a large music school, a school for music and art, actually, in Brooklyn, in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, for 50 years. And she taught languages, and her big thing was that when she was a teenager, she went to study at the Milan Conservatory, which is also known as La Scala Conservatory, and it's the place where all the great Italian opera composers, Puccini, Verdi, Menotti, all the dudes, they all studied there. And she studied there as a very young woman. She was about 15 years old, and she was one of 2 black students in the entire place. And so it made a big impression. She spent 2 years in Europe, and she was always saying that one day she intended to go back. And she often told me that when she went back, she would get a gigolo to go back with her. She was about 85 at the time, and she would say, yes, I'm going to have somebody with me, and we're going to sit on the Champs-Élysées and drink she was Methodist, so I'm not sure there was alcohol involved, but they were going to drink something, and they were going to sit and watch the passers-by and savor the great culture of Europe. So anyway, I write here in the book about going to visit my great-aunt Marge in Brooklyn, and whenever you visited her, it was inevitable that there was going to be music involved. And usually it was one of these things. She had a beautiful Steinway in her living room, and she would command people to play. So, Aunt Marge, all dolled up in a form-fitting evening gown, shimmering with red sequins, pushed away her plate of sweet potato pie. This is Thanksgiving now, right? She pushes away the pie, took a sip of black coffee, and nodded in my direction. What's this I hear about you turning into a jazz musician? She winked and stood up from the table. Come over to the piano and let me hear you play something. An invitation from Aunt Marge was less a request than a command. Several of her former students had gone on to careers in the music business. Janet Moody, an operatic coloratura from the New York City Opera, had been Aunt Marge's student, as was Ben Vereen, the actor who'd starred in the hit Broadway musical Pippin. Well, Aunt Marge, I'm a bit out of practice, I began, preparing my excuse in advance. Nonsense, Carolyn. Music isn't about practicing. Music is about communicating. Stop your whining and play me something. Aunt Marge sat down on the bench of the small electric organ she kept in the opposite corner of the living room and gestured for me to begin. Gradually, as Aunt Marge's friends and relatives realized a concert was in the offing, the rest of the conversation around the dining room table slowly came to a halt. I sat down on the piano bench and silently repeated my affirmation. Now I have to interject here that I had suffered from terrible stage fright, terrible. And so I was doing these affirmations. I write all about this in the book, and I always share this with my students that in fact, I did survive it. But at the time, it was, almost career breaking. So anyway, I had my affirmation, which was, you are always in the right place at the right time, living your beautiful life. Pretty good. Then, taking a deep breath, I launched into a medley of songs by Duke Ellington. Don't Get Around Much Anymore, followed by Prelude to a Kiss. By the time I got to the chorus of It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing, my family were stamping their feet and clapping along. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Aunt Marge smiling and waving her arthritic brown hands in time to the music. Next thing I knew, she was playing along on the electric organ. Do-wop, 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 she sang at top volume, harmonizing along in a weathered bass voice. I backed off a bit and let her take over. For the next half hour, she regaled us with hymns and bits of jazz, bringing the house down with her bluesy version of Deep River. So that was Thanksgiving at my Aunt Marjorie's. And so, I think to conclude my program for the moment, I think I shall play in honor of Aunt Marjorie's bluesy rendition of Deep River. No, it's like I don't talk about my.
Basically, it is just allowing my feelings to be from the sound, go into the paint, and celebrate the beautiful with Carolyn. That's it.
Thanks so much, guys. So, I'm done. Linda's done. What I will do is if you have any questions about the book or about anything, we're here. I think there are, it
There's
doesn't look
cookie
like
and refreshments back there.
cookie and refreshments. That sounds good. So please enjoy some refreshments. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Does anyone have a question before we disband? Yes.
I want to know if you have any of this music recorded.
I do. I have some CDs. If you go to my website, and did you guys, if you came late and you didn't get my card, I have a few cards. Did you get a card?
I did get one.
Before the sun goes out, down, get outside. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.